if you have a niche and you know something really well within healthcare, I think that it's an advantage, right? So I wouldn't jump into healthcare just, with an idea without understanding how it's going to impact patients. But then if you do have a niche, I think that's an advantage where like, this is how my thing fits.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the AbadAssLife podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrew Abad. I'm your host. And this podcast is really all about empowering you guys to go ahead and live your own badass life, whatever that looks like to you. And we try to do that by bringing you people who are experts or are becoming experts in their own field, and they will give you the content, the information that you need to start pursuing whatever that looks like for you, right? So today is going to be a great episode because we have here with us a former healthcare executive who took the entrepreneurship route, and he's not only a great entrepreneur, but he's also a great dad, a husband, and he's become a good friend. So Danny Mobley, thanks for being here today, man.
Great introduction, man. That was awesome. You killed that. And I appreciate it. No, we're neighbors. That's been the cool thing. I tell the story about, like, I wanted some office space and I was looking to get out of my house, and I put out one note and you answered, and that's how we met. But you live right down the street. So it's been cool to come up here every day. And how coincidental, dude, you got this beautiful podcast thing, and my Humans of Healthcare thing is just, in need of something like this. So it's really cool to have that happen. I don't know how stuff like that happens. It happens all the time to me, but cool coincidences.
Yeah, no, I think it was great mainly because I wasn't necessarily looking to rent any office space. Like, this is pretty much my headquarters, but like, I did want to start like forming a team of local people that have the same vision, similar ideas and goals, and like, you fit perfectly. So
Thanks,
I
man.
was like, okay, yeah, this will make sense. And then, like, yeah, just having that proximity, like, it's definitely, I think it's been great, and I look forward to see all the things that we're gonna do.
I know.
But just to give the audience a little bit of context, like, just tell us, who is Danny? Tell us a little bit about yourself, like maybe a quick backstory of like how you ended up in the industry that you're in and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just random. Well, I was growing up thinking I was going to be a cop my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And, I got to realize that dream early on. Like, I was 20 and I joined the New Orleans Police Department just because they were hiring, right? And I was so young, and I hated that part of my life, that transition between college and going into your career. And to be a cop, you didn't really have to have a degree. So I just bounced, college and got hired. And, I did that for a couple of years. And, but I was married early. So my wife at the time, we're from Oklahoma. So I'm from Oklahoma, and, now live here in Florida, obviously. But back then it was a big deal to move to New Orleans just, on a whim. And it was a major culture shift for us, as a young couple. But we got pregnant when we were down there in New Orleans, and she didn't want to make a life in that city. It's a tough city if you're not from there,
How Tris, tell us a little bit about like the experience of being a cop there. I just got done watching this show. It's on Netflix. It's called Your Honor. And it shows, like a lot of the New Orleans experience type thing. It shows a couple of like the families that run the crime scene there and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Did you ever have like any story that like jumps at you whenever you think about your time in the force over there?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, man. Like, first of all, the gangs weren't like gangs in California.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have like the whole organized Crip blood sort of scene. It was almost where you grew up. It was street by street. So somehow you'd rep the street that you lived on or grew up on, which was always kind of weird to me because, like, you're renting a house or an apartment on a street, but you could like move next week,
Yeah.
And it's like, why are you repping that? Just because of where you live. But it wasn't organized, thankfully, but it was chaotic, so everybody's out for themselves. And we had 4 projects in the district that I was in, and I ended up being what they called a jump out boy, which was a task force, and we'd go out and just make proactive cases. So I got into I got into a lot of shit, man. Like, and that's what I wanted at 21 years old. I still couldn't believe they gave me a car and a gun, and they're like, you can go take people's freedom like that. You guys are crazy to let me do that, you know? But, you know, it was interesting. You saw a different side of the world, you know, different side of life. And, I don't think I could appreciate it at that time. I was just too young to really kind of take it in for, and do the right things with it. I just was all about the sort of running and gunning and, you know, feeling the power and, you know, but then when I left, dude, I got humbled. You know, some of the cases I wish that I, wouldn't remember are the ones that I kind of remember most. You know, one time there was in the projects, the St. Thomas projects, there was a kid who was like 4 and he got a gunshot wound through his neck.
Wow.
And it was his younger brother who had shot him on accident. Like the kid was just eating cereal. I don't know why I remember that. But when I got into the apartment, there were roaches all over the cereal. And so I kept thinking to myself, man, is this kid better off? You know, like it just was really bad place to live. And so, so yeah, that one sticks out. But the car accidents, that was crazy. There was one where a car, actually, I showed up for a dead body that was hanging over like a fence, like a big chain link fence, like that was 10 feet tall and like draped over it. And I couldn't figure out why and how he got there. I'm looking up, like, how did this person fall out of a plane? Or, I mean, what happened? Wow. But eventually we found out that he was drunk driving a car, and on those big overpasses in New Orleans that go up really high by the Superdome, like apparently a sign grabbed him by the head because he's leaning out his window like this and pulled him out of his car and threw him down. And that's how he landed on the fence. And his car bounced down the overpass. So that was a trip, you know. But there was a lot of car accidents, a lot of shootings. Look, I worked like 32 murders in my 2 years there. So
wow, yeah. That's a lot.
I know it is.
It sounds like a lot. Yeah, I don't know what the
small town. I mean, like it's only got, I think today, 200,000 people. You know, back then is quite a bit more because it was before Katrina. But yeah, it was pretty small population to have that much murder, and they were the murder capital of the world just like 2 years ago again. So, you know, they're back on the map for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, like being a cop, like I think it's like a very noble thing to do. It's like if you are in there for the right reasons, like I think they should be, first of all, compensated way more, right? Because like you can't really put a price on like the ultimate sacrifice that a lot of them have, you know, unfortunately, you know, the whole thing is serve and protect them. Like they're supposed to be there to protect us, and sometimes it's with their life. So like, I don't know how do you quantify that from a financial standpoint, but like I've always thought that like there has to be a little bit more, I think, training or a little bit more requirements because, like you said, at that age, at that young age, sometimes none of us, I think, are ready unless you have like that devotion to it and you grew up knowing that okay, like I want to become this for the right reasons. Like I think like majority of you know, the kids, because you're a kid at 18, 20 years old.
Oh yeah.
Majority of them who joined that young don't have like still all of that figured out.
Right.
And so like yeah. But what was the aha moment or the pivotal moment in which you decided like, okay, this is not necessarily what I want. I'm gonna move into like my next thing. Was there any particular thing that happened, or was it like an overtime thing? Like instead of
I wish it was an aha thing, you know. But it really wasn't for me. I got a job, you know, and the job was delivering medical equipment to hospitals. And I think that I just wanted to compete and do my best at that job and move up, you know, whatever chain there was to move up. And that just kind of carried me. I moved from operations and then got an opportunity after like a year of delivering equipment. I would wear a tie to work. I would do the things that traditionally might put you ahead. But again, I wasn't educated. I didn't come from the field. I just did those basic sort of effort things. And then I got promoted. I got an opportunity. I moved, you know, from Oklahoma City to Tulsa, which isn't a big deal, but for our family, it was, you know, it's a big deal. I had my daughter at the time, so just a really young couple. And then that first year in sales, I made like 80 grand. And that was from being 25,000 as a police officer to like 35,000 as a delivery driver, you know, for medical equipment. And then I made 80. And when I hit that, I was like, man, it's over, right? this is crazy. That was the most money in the world to me at the time, you know, and I was like 24. And so yeah, that really helped set that sort of, this is why people do this. You know, there's money does matter. And I wish it didn't so much, frankly. I wish it didn't, but that was just something to catapult me further into my career and see potential. And so that's how I sort of just stumbled into it. And then I'll tell you that was a pivotal moment too at 24, where hospital executives in the rural hospitals, they'd let me in and they'd talk to me and they'd show me their world. And they would kind of say, hey, look, you know, if you do right by us and you really care and you put in the effort and then you pay it forward someday, that's all we can ask from you, you know. But I was just so impressed that they would talk to me, you know, because I had that whole, you know, humility thing going on. I'd been humbled from being a cop to sweeping floors and, you know, having a boss yell at me that, you know, normally if I was a cop, I would have probably put him in a pretzel and thrown him in jail, you know. But in this case, like I had to live by the rules, you know. That was a big moment to be humbled, but then to make the money and then feel that motivation because I'd succeeded, you got financially rewarded. And then I just kind of took it from there. These relationships have been the catalyst for everything that I've ever done in my entire career. They gave me confidence. They believed in me. And I still don't know why. I still wonder, like, what was it about, I don't know, that time or me? Why did they choose me to pour into me like that?
Well, I mean, I can tell you that in my experience, a lot of people that have or are in certain positions, you know, higher ups in whatever industry it is, normally tend to be good judges of character. So whenever they see somebody with potential, they're gonna, you know, want to pour in resources and their time and whatnot to help develop that person. And I think
Sure.
that's probably one of the things that they saw is like,
Sure.
you know, you were a driven young, you know, young man that had a lot of potential, and they wanted
Yeah.
to be part of it.
Makes
So
sense now. Right. I mean,
yeah,
I see that. I mean, at the time, I don't know how I don't remember how I presented. You know, I just kind of always lived in my own brain, so it's hard to see from the outside perspective. I just didn't know anything, and I was, you know, I was all over the place, but I think I was just passionate. You're probably right. They saw some passion and some drive, and it's like, you know, that's probably better than the other, you know, mopes that are walking in. You know, they don't have any passion. They're just here to do something and get something. But I think in my world, Andrew, I think I've always cared. You know, like I really do genuinely care about the people that I'm working with and sitting across from. And I think it shows, you know, I think there's something to that. I didn't know it at the time. Had no idea that that was a quality or trait that would mean something to somebody. It's just, you know, it's just kind of there, you know?
I personally think like caring, it's the single biggest quality or asset, if you want to call it an asset, uh, especially when you're in a leadership position, right? I
Yeah.
think like people can tell, and people are way more likely to give you their all if they can feel and sense that you actually care for them, as opposed to them being just like another number if, you know, they work for you and your company. And I think that that's probably the best or one of the best traits in a leader, you know, who has a team or who's in charge of a company or
Yeah.
a CEO and going, speaking about CEOs and founders and stuff like that. At what point in your career as an executive in the healthcare field did you decide that you wanted to change that for, you know, your
Yeah.
own company?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. Like the first time I was 27 when I co-founded a company,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't do the business side of it. I say that I didn't do the setup and the investment side. I was really just a salesperson that had an idea and knew how the business worked. And then I latched on with a partner that got all the funding and everything and put the company together. So it was a little different, you know, but I still was the co-founder. And so it was entrepreneurial, you know, to a certain degree, but I didn't feel ownership for some reason like I do now. But then I got out of it after 4 or 5 years. So I had that taste, you know, and it was, you know, again, I feel like it was so young back then, you know, and that was 18 years ago, maybe something like that, 15 years ago. I just don't think I was ready to be an owner, you know? And so then I got back into the corporate world and I made a lot of money for a lot of people. And that's really, at the end of the day, once I figured out that they're no different than me, that there's no like superpower or special sauce, that's when I'm like, wait a second, why are they making all the money off of my efforts, and then I'm still limited, because I have to follow rules that they've put that are good for them. And so really it became about money again. I was like, all right, for me to be able to spring out of here, I need to have like a nest egg. And so I went and made it happen. I spent like, the last company I was at, we started off at like 17 million a year in revenue, grew to like 65 million in 5 years. And that's big for the industry, or the medical equipment industry that we're in. And, they sold for 260 million. And I was a catalyst to that, right? So I got organic customers at hospital system level where, we'd break off chunks of like 3, 4, 5, 6 million per year to add to, that amount. That 17 goes to 65 pretty quick. We also did some roll-ups. So I learned how to do roll-ups. You're buying companies along the way and integrating them. To me, that was like, it was a good experience, but really hard, but organically winning those hospital systems, that's where I made the money. I made, and I made like a couple of million after, in 2 years or whatever. And with that money, I felt ultimate confidence. And I was like, all right, I can kind of parlay this.
Now you have that nest egg to go and like really after your vision, your passion, the thing that you wanted to do that was going to felt your own. And is that how Humans of Healthcare started? And
it is.
Downtime Trace?
I wanted more, than what I had. I didn't want to, I knew I didn't want to keep winning like that. I liked the money, but I didn't like it enough for what I went through. I didn't want to have to grind through that again for a couple of years. So I was like, look, there's got to be a better way to get there and enjoy that journey. And so I was watching a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, and he was just at one clip got me. He was talking to some lady about her daughter, and the clip, I remember, it was like, this lady said, my daughter is all the way on social media all the time. How do I protect her? And he had a great answer, man. I was blown away by his answer. 'Cause I have a daughter, right? So he's just like, you got to build her confidence, and if you do that the right way, then it won't matter what she's exposed to, so stuff like that was grabbing me. And I'm like, who is this guy? And why did he show up in my world? And then I watched more and watched more. And he gave a keynote one time. He was like on stage with like, I think it was a group of real estate agents or lawyers. And he goes to the crowd after they're hooting and hollering. He's like, you guys are going crazy right now, but you leave here and like 2% of you will do anything.
He's actually going to follow through.
Yeah. And I felt like a challenge. I'm like, okay. So I got in front of a camera and just turned it on. And I did some like, and I did like 10 takes the first time, I had no idea what I was doing. I just said, hey, here's who I am. I'm doing this because in posterity, if I'm 40, whatever, 42 now, and I don't do this because I don't like being on camera, I don't like my picture taken, I'm like insecure. I had all these things going on, but I was like, that's kind of selfish, because if my grandchildren want to see who I was at this age, I'm depriving them of that, so to speak. So that was the motivation. And it didn't matter what I said on camera, but I got affirmation, and then I did another video, got more affirmation. And then I was like, okay, I remember going back to 24 and all those people that poured into me. What can I give back or pay forward? And it's just my knowledge, what I had was what I know. And so I did that. I just kind of got on video and talked about what I knew and kept it simple and concise. And then more people watched and I got more affirmation, and then just kind of parlayed into, hey, let's talk to somebody else. And the first guy I talked to was a friend of mine. His name's Suki. He's from Guyana. He's an immigrant. And he told me the story about what it was like in Guyana growing up. He didn't have running water. They didn't have electricity, all that stuff. And he came to the United States and he loved healthcare. And he described like, I even love bathing people. He's like, I love taking care of people. And I was like, wow, that's powerful. He said, but when I got to Cornell up in the Northeast, I made this life for myself as a perfusionist, which is somebody that helps in heart surgery. They're the people that monitor the heart and lung machine,
okay.
So they are responsible for life. And so he said, this was like the 80s. He's like, so this group of women, white women, would come up to him and just make him feel awful. And like one time they touched his skin and she's like, what makes you think you can work at an institution like this? And he told that story on my, and we're just talking and it just came out of him. He never told that story before. We had hundreds of thousands of people that watched that and gave comments and like, poured into this thing. And like, man, that's can be powerful. So I did more interviews and more interviews. But the whole time I just felt like I can give now. So this is what I want to give, I'll give money if I can. It's hard to give stuff away, bro. Like it really is. I've found that giving away stuff for free is really a challenge. You have to really work at it to do it the right way.
Yeah, that's something that happened with me too with Media Minds, So like as you know, I have a couple of different businesses, and over the years working with like freelancers or agencies that sometimes didn't meet deadlines, didn't really take it serious enough, whatnot. I decided to start my own team, right? And so once my own team was able to help my main company build up to the point where I wanted it, and it helped us get there.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of people in my network that have businesses started asking me to help them, with their marketing, needs. And so I said, okay, cool. Like, we'll do it. That's pretty much how Media Minds was born, right? And then my goal was to help startups or help small businesses really get through the challenges that business ownership, brings. Just, get through them just not alone. Like having a team in their corner. And like you said, giving stuff for free, it's really hard.
Yeah.
Because obviously, I was fortunate that I could fund a lot of my payroll, my expenses for Media Minds through my other companies, and was still able to give, like good services at reasonable prices, and sometimes even free to some of these companies. But the one thing that I realized is that people don't appreciate free. Like if it doesn't cost you something, it's really hard to appreciate it, right? I think it's just like a fundamental concept just in humans overall, not just like business ownership.
Right.
And so like at that point I was like, okay, now I want to still help them, but like just lowering my prices isn't the way.
Right.
Like that's not necessarily the best way to help them, right? Because like if it doesn't work, then they don't lose anything.
Yeah.
And that's not how business works, right? Like if you want to make business work, like you have to realize that there's consequences for every decision that you do, and sometimes you are just gonna get punched in the face by the market, and there is consequences to making bad decisions. And so that's just a thought that came to my mind when you said like it's just hard to give stuff for free, right? Because it's not just like the monetary cost, but it's like it's the time, and it's sometimes the pushback that you can get from trying to help entrepreneurs that are not at the level yet that they need to be in order to take advantage of that help.
Yeah. Well, and like my help was directed towards hospital executives, right? And so CEOs, especially small hospitals. And we did a survey, like a legit survey of a couple of these high level CEOs. And this was just recently. And we asked like, are you friends with other CEOs? And of course, so out of 10, how many do you think that if their hospitals were failing, that would stand up and raise their hand and say, I need help? Out of the 10 that how many do you think would raise up and say that? And he really thought about it. He's like, none. None of them would ask for help. And Andrew, that's been profound for me because I ask for help. There's this story about Bill Packard, back like in the 80s when Hewlett Packard was, kind of going big, and he got a call from a 12-year-old kid that was like asking him if he had something for some sort of counter, and he was trying to build a computer or whatever. And, Bill Packard answered his phone at home, and this kid was on the other end asking for something, and he's like laughing, he's like, hey, I'm 12 years old. This is what I'm looking for. And then it turned out that kid was Steve Jobs. And then Steve Jobs is like this dude who asks people for stuff that he needs, and asks for help. He's like, I've never been turned down. And I've learned that over the past couple of years is a big lesson. If I need something, I just go and ask somebody, And it's because I want to show people that it works. If you need something, ask for help, especially those hospital executives, they need it. And it's people like us that are out here that are willing to give it. And if you're not asking, you're not accepting it, then you're only putting your community at risk, So there's real consequences there for not knowing how to do that. But they're all human, right? So they're all fallible in that way. And it's all this pride, and they got their board beating up on them all the time, and they're isolated. So, it's tough on them.
And that's what I was going to ask. It's like, what do you think is the main reason as to why they're not asking for help? Is it like their pride and their ego and not wanting to admit that whatever it is that they're doing is not working? Or is there any other things that you can think of that are like specific to the industry, or is just like the character traits of those particular CEOs?
My opinion is that it's a little bit generational, because our executives right now are boomers in large part, and they have seen a lot in their lives, seen success, and they have this idea about how things should go. And I think, coming from the generation where they were trained from, you didn't really ask for help. You had to go figure it out. And that was a measure of how good of an executive you were. And so I think there's a lot of that, at play. I also think, we need more female representation. We need more diversity, because I think if we can get to that point and have some healthy diversity, it just comes with different thoughts, right? People think and see problems differently. But I found that women are more willing to ask for help. And so that's something that I hope that people will look at as, like, we can learn from that, and it's good. And there's all sorts of evidence that points to this being good. And so I've actually, believe it or not, I mean, it makes sense now, but I've had more success with, women executives probably in my career than I've had with male executives. Yeah, it's pretty even because there's fewer females, but it seems like, I'm going to win more often if females are, in that group. If I were to go after a group of females, I'd win at a higher level than going after and trying to do business with a group of males, because they're so much more open to, to the help that we can give them. And they're not as suspect, they have good intuition and they trust their instincts, it seems like, better than males do. So there's all these reasons I think that I connect with people differently. But I try to show up the right way for both. It's just, I know these guys aren't going to ask for help, so it makes it a little bit different.
Yeah, you're going to have to break way more barriers with men, because like you said, men egos and pride, I think it's just built in us to be a little bit more of the, like, I think we are just wired to be, the providers, the ones that figure it out. That it's just in our DNA. Yeah. So it's a little bit easier to, bring that help to females than to male in general. But like you said, it could be very well generational as well, because especially nowadays, like back in the day, I think like the way people looked at competition or like sharing information, sharing, whatever the secrets are, the secret sauce of what's working, it was. It wasn't the same way that it is now, right? Like before, you try to like withheld the information, you try not to, like you try to compete and make sure that you were the only one. Now we're coming up in a culture where among a lot of like top entrepreneurs, like there's just so much information out there that it's almost pointless to just like withhold information. So if you come up with something that it's good, that it's working for you, like majority of people now, especially the people that are at the top, have realized that collaboration, it happens like at top levels, and competition, it just keeps you at like lower levels, right? And so I think that could be, like generational differences for sure.
Yeah.
So what would you say is like the biggest advantage that you got, or like, I don't want to say a skill set, but like being in that corporate world and now being a business owner and having your own business within the same field, do you think that it really helped you like understand how they think, and like how can you actually help them, whether they actually give you the words or not, right? Like, because you were in their shoes for a decade to almost 2 decades.
Yeah, about 2 decades. And the thing that I'm most appreciative of is the opportunity to fail and not having the ultimate consequences, right? when you work at a corporation, there's so many things that you're trying to win that you can fail. And I've found that I learn way more when I fail, right? And so I started seeking out failure at a certain point a few years ago. And I started taking bigger risks too, because I knew that I could fail. And I don't know if it was intended by this company that they set it up that way. I don't think so. But it just naturally happened where I failed enough and I learned from the failures, and then I didn't lose after that. And then I started learning from the victories and the successes. So I'd say the corporation allows you to do that, which is great. You know, it's a great place to go get an education. But for me, I'm at 46. I feel like a guy who's been a backup quarterback, right? For a lot of years.
Hey, if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or an industry expert who has an interesting story or insight worth sharing, we want to feature you on our podcast. So click the link below to apply, tell us a little bit about yourself, and get ready to start inspiring our listeners.
So, what do you think are like the skills or lack of skills that can make or break entrepreneurs in the healthcare field? So, like not like your general ones, like consistency and things like that.
Sure.
But are there any particular skills that you think entrepreneurs in the healthcare space should have or must have for them to succeed?
Yeah, I think you have to understand the decision-making environment in healthcare and what drives that. I think if you're just like a person who's coming in with new tech or whatever, and you're trying to push your product or service, and you don't understand the decision-making environment and why people make decisions and how to get to the right people within the organizations, you can fail pretty fast. And it's not easy. I don't know what to call it, but there is a way that people do things that is different than any place else I've ever seen or any other industry as far as making decisions. And it's a lot of relationship driven stuff, a lot of politics stuff, a lot of like, who do you know and how do you know them, and they won't even give you the opportunity to talk about your product if you aren't in that right circle. And you can spend a lot of time talking to the wrong people, because there's a lot of people who work in healthcare that think that they're probably a decision maker. There's something that gives them the impression that they have the power to do stuff, but they don't. They don't. And so like if you're savvy, you'll figure it out, but it's going to take a while because, you don't know healthcare. The other thing I would say is you probably in healthcare to do this really well, you got to, I think you got to be kind and care about the patients. There's got to be something about you that ultimately cares about the patients and not so much about yourself, right? So, if you've got something that you're going after that you're like, just want to get to your goal and you don't really care about how you get there, I think you have a harder time. So if you have a niche and you know something really well within healthcare, I think that it's an advantage, right? So I wouldn't jump into healthcare just, with an idea without understanding how it's going to impact patients. But then if you do have a niche, I think that's an advantage where like this is how my thing fits within the healthcare spectrum.
Yeah, you
right?
become the expert in your niche.
Absolutely.
And you're able to like just really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a niche thing, man. Like there's so many pockets, like I was talking to on the podcast the other day, a guy who does heart surgery, and it's great story, great guy. He's now getting into AI, and he's using AI for robotic surgery. And I asked him, I'm like, look, man, I'm the general public. I don't have a clue about what that means. And I'm having trouble in general with connecting with what AI means and how it's going to affect us in my life and all that stuff. And he's like, all right, well, what kind of car do you drive? And I'm like, a Tesla. And he's like, perfect. Self-driving, think about it like that. This robot is learning from all of these surgeons, heart surgeons, and if you go in at this angle, like millimeters off, like that can make a difference. And the AI will recognize that because it's learning from the best surgeons throughout the world. And so you show up and you got all that collective knowledge from the best surgeons in the world going into that procedure with that robot. And so you're just kind of guiding it at that point. And he said, it's like one of those things where your car will drive better than you according to the rules,
Yeah.
things you might not know. And so he's really excited about that. They're using this AI technology within these Da Vinci robots doing surgery on silicone people right now. Like, they've created this environment and they're close to releasing it,
That was actually going to be my next question. I was going to ask you, like,
Yeah.
how much do you think AI has impacted the healthcare industry, or what do you think in which ways do you think it's going to influence it or impact it the most?
Burnout. I think it's going to help with the burnout that exists. We don't talk about this enough. Like doctors, there's doctors that are burnt out, working every day, walking zombies that could care less about the people that they're serving. Nurses too. It's not just doctors, it's all the clinicians. And what's scary is you don't know, because again, they don't volunteer this information, right? They're doing their best. And it's a sad state of affairs. But the truth is, AI can ease the burden that comes with the job, the part of the job that they hate, which is a lot of the paperwork and things like that. And I think that will help prolong the current doctors. But we have a doctor shortage that nobody talks about, and it's crisis level, right? So we have to have AI to do things that doctors are currently doing. And that's my biggest concern right now is doctor shortage. Out of all of healthcare, that's the biggest concern I have.
So you think it's basically just going to be able to take on a lot of like the lead work, a lot of the monotonous like things that you know, like unfortunately some doctors or maybe even like high level surgeons or whatever still have to put in that work, which is not necessarily like. If you compare it to a business, it's like if you have the CEO doing those monotonous tasks,
Right.
the company might be affected because like the person is not in the right seat, is not performing the task that should be performing.
Right.
So like you think that that's going to be the best
Yeah. It's the
implication?
principles that you and I probably live by. And, I go to this thing called Strategic Coach, and Strategic Coach, they talk about your unique ability and that you have different levels of energy when you work on things that you enjoy, that intrigue you, right? And so your batteries won't drain if you're working on things that you really love. And so I think it will reframe the discussion with doctors and, clinicians and what they have to do versus what they want to do and what they enjoy. And if we can reframe it like that, I think we can get a lot more mileage out of who we have. And then I think the people coming in will be more apt to come in because, they'll learn faster. They won't have to learn as many things, so that's a big deal too, is the length of time that you have to go to school prevents us from kind of curing this doctor shortage, right? So if there's ways to learn faster and better, and if they have to learn only specific things versus everything, I think AI could have a profound impact on that aspect of healthcare.
Yeah, I think it's going to have an impact on almost every industry, and it's like we are not beginning to just scratch the surface of all the things it will do. And it's just that'll be another podcast in on itself, because there's just so much to talk about when it comes to AI and like everything that's happening currently. Another quick pop-up question. Like I just thought about this. You have spent so much time with in this space, doctors and all that stuff. What do you think is the percentage of them that actually became doctors because they had that passion, they were fueled by that idea of like, okay, I want to become a doctor to save lives, I want to become a surgeon to save lives, versus the ones that were just like, well, it's a good profession, you make good money, like my dad was a doctor type thing. Like if you had to like eyeball it in a way, just the personal opinion, what do you think is the percentage that are like just truly passionate about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe it's 93 to 95% have the genuine, pure nature of why they joined. They just don't present like that all the time, right? And I think, again, burnout has such a big weight on this discussion, because they might be frustrated by some of the stuff going on, but in their core, they still have that desire to help. So in my opinion, in my experience, they're mostly great.
That's a lot higher than what I would have guessed.
Sure.
And like I take your opinion like it counts way more than mine, because you spend so much more time with with a lot of these people in this industry. Like I've only experienced it when a family member had to go to the hospital, or when I went to the hospital, or stuff like that, kind of like as a general public, from the general public
most people,
eye,
right? Yeah, you got that experience that most people have.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that don't understand, like, what they have to go through and persevere through to get to that point. Why would anybody do that? You know, if you just think about it. And now some get lost along the way, which is why I think there's a small percentage that have lost themselves. That's to be expected. It's a marginal thing, but I am, in my experience, I don't know any bad ones. So, I'm speaking from who I know and who I don't. And if they mess up, that's a different story. But
I think it's just like anything else. I mean, there's some bad apples, and in every industry, and then like, I think like this is one of those few industries that is very like, that relies a lot on the passion that the people have for it. Because like, for example, doctors, teachers, cops, like I think their performance will be directly correlated by how passionate they are about it, right? And so like, without taking into consideration any outside factors or whatnot, like I think it's just directly correlated with how passionate you are about that.
Totally
Otherwise,
agree.
it's just, So what would you say, it's like, what advice would you give to anybody that potentially is in the same spot where you were back then, when you decided to, go out and do your own thing and become a business owner in the healthcare space? What would you say to them? What would be like, that one piece of advice that you wish somebody gave to you?
Yeah, I think it's the confidence thing that always comes to my mind. Like I could have done this a long time ago if I'd have just had the confidence in myself. And I think that the corporations that I've experienced, they try to keep you in a box. They try to keep you in your place. And so I look at things like rungs on a ladder, right? And like, so many people are programmed to go rung by rung by rung, but they're programmed that way because the institutions have put these rules in place. If I would have known to jump from rung 1 to rung 10, I don't know, 5 years ago, I'd be 10x where I am today. And I just learned that. So the one piece of advice, and this was from a stat that I got, it's kind of like the Gary Vee stat that we were talking about, but people who work at corporations, 97% of them don't do anything outside of work hours to improve themselves. They don't read, they don't watch podcasts, they don't do anything that they're not forced to do by the corporation. And I was in that crowd of 97 until 4 or 5 years ago. And it's when I broke out is when I really kind of saw the world and realized that I didn't have to take those rungs one by one. I could just go to the top.
Why do you think that happens?
Well, because I'm anticipating that they want to keep you where you're at because they don't have people to replace you that are, they haven't developed succession plans for people throughout the corporation. So if you leave that place where they need you, then they're afraid that they're not going to have anybody to come behind you and fill your role. That's my thought from what I've seen.
I think like also it probably have something to do with the fact that like, especially when we're talking about like, healthcare executives and stuff like that, like, or people that have formed a career in the healthcare field, like a lot of them, have like, good salaries. They're in a very comfortable, spot.
Sure.
So I think it takes like an extra driven person to want to continue pushing, learning, and investing in themselves once they are in a comfortable position.
Oh, I see. Yeah. You were talking about that side. I was talking about like, why would the executives want to keep you in a box? No, I think you're right. I think comfort, you're right. That's a big part of it. And I'm driven a lot by fear, and I try to go through, like, I don't see barriers or boundaries, the same way I think are obstacles. I heard this quote from Robert Brault, and I sunk my teeth into it, and I put it on a lot of my podcasts. But, we're kept from our goals, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal. And that stuck with me because if I don't have a vision about where I want to get to, then I'll just end up where I end up. And I think a lot of people are out there like that, right? They just let obstacles sort of derail them from whatever they maybe want, but didn't really want. It's easy to say I want something, but then what are you going to do about it? Right. So I think you're right. I think people just sort of stay stuck because they're comfortable and they like comfort, but you kind of almost have to not like comfort
to be able to grow and continue achieving
right? Sucks sometimes,
the
but
bigger things that you want to achieve. If you are, like a high achiever and you want to accomplish all these things, like you have to continuously keep putting yourself in uncomfortable spots because that's where we grow, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
I've been during like times of my life, I can like just pinpoint years where I was just so comfortable, and I think it was some of the years that I had the less amount of growth.
Yep.
In my journey.
Yeah.
And it's just because, things were great.
Yep.
Like,
yeah.
accomplished everything that
Me too, man.
thought I wanted.
Me too. I was there. I've not always been this driven. There's a period of time where I was in Oklahoma sitting in, a comfy, lazy boy chair, and I remember I was there a lot in front of a fireplace, and it was awesome. And I was watching like series on TV, and, my daughter was going to high school, and I was, it was great. But then I knew something wasn't right. I felt it ultimately. And I wanted to get back to that place so bad, but there was nothing for me there except for wasting time, And so that's when I uprooted my entire life, moved to Florida 6 months before my daughter graduated high school, left her with her mom, and I came here. I lived in a lake house by myself, and that's when I really started focusing on, how I was going to grow and,
just a different season.
Yeah, totally.
I think like the key thing is honestly to just be true to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no right or wrong answer. Like,
Right.
it's perfectly fine to be comfortable and just be okay if you're happy that way. Like I've actually heard Gary Vee talking about that in a podcast as well, where he talks about how he has friends that are billionaires or at least worth hundreds of millions, and they're completely miserable.
Right.
And then he has friends who make 40, 50K a year who have the time to go and, like be at their son's practice or be their son's coaches and just spend more time with the family, scrape together a couple vacations a year, and they're completely happy, right?
Yeah.
So like neither one of those, actually the situation, like the circumstance that is wrong is being the guy with like hundreds of millions and being completely miserable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Because either one, it's okay if you are happy putting in or taking on a lot of stuff, taking on a lot of stress, like, trying to achieve something, and that's what fuels you, then okay, cool. Like sometimes you're going to be stressed out. Just deal with it. It's part of life. That's what you signed up for.
Sure.
If you're happy with just like not having a lot of the stress and just, taking in like the lesser, income or whatever you want to call it,
Right.
and just making do with that, that's great too. But
Yeah.
it all like really boils down to like what is it that we truly want.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just, in any industry or just in life in general, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the stats are there. Like you have people when they retire who die within a certain amount of years, right? And you wonder, like, what was the reason for that? And I think about that a lot, frankly. And I'd love to work till I die, but I enjoy what I do.
There's actually, you probably know him. I know that you know something about poker. There's this one guy who's a poker legend. His name is Doyle Bronson.
Oh, yeah.
And he has a quote that is like really cool. And he says, "We don't get old because we stop playing." Oh, no, wait. I'm sorry. I completely butchered it. It's, we don't stop playing because we get old. We get old because we stop playing, right?
Nice.
And the playing aspect doesn't necessarily represent just playing. It can be whatever it is that you're into. Like it could be work. It could be, time with your family. It could be that one thing that fuels you and makes you feel alive.
Oh, man.
It has that
love
spark,
that analogy. And I think poker is a beautiful way to describe it, because when you're at the poker table and you're engaged, there's no other feeling. Like your mind is totally focused on what your mind was anyway.
Yeah.
And I can imagine you guys with the levels that you play at, you got to pay attention to moving parts, but the outside world is gone in my experience when I'm sitting at a table, and it's like you're zoned out. And if you're there a lot, I imagine you're alive. It feels alive to be in that situation.
Nothing else matters.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like, and you see the beauty of poker, it's like, at least to me, the way I look at it is like, it's very similar to life in the sense that sometimes you can do everything right and still lose.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can just butcher completely the hand or play it wrong or do things wrong and win. But it's not going to happen often. And in long term, if you continue doing the wrong things, you're not going to win.
Right.
So it's like one of those sports, if you want to call it, where there's still that variance aspect of it, like the luck factor that life has as well. So like in life, it doesn't matter if you do everything right, and you can still lose. Like you
Yeah.
still,
Yeah.
like in entrepreneurship and just, you get unlucky. Like timing and luck is a real thing, I
Yeah.
think.
Yep.
But I also do believe that just like in poker, if you just put your head down, continue making the right choices, continue doing the right thing and playing your hands the right way, you will win long term.
I completely agree.
And so, yeah, I mean, I love the game. I could talk
Yeah.
about it
Oh,
for
dude.
hours. It's given
I
me,
love that you love it. The
yeah,
passion that comes off of you, and that's the beauty of it. Like I so appreciate what goes into the angles that you have to see. It's more than just sitting down. You've had to think about this stuff and research and get into it. But like, I don't know, man, like I think about a lot of these analogies that we've kind of talked about today, and they do line up. Like energy is a big one. You just said it. Like if you have the right energy and you know how to use that, whether it came from a lucky moment or an unlucky moment, it's still energy, right?
hmm
And you play off of that, in life, like you might in cards. If you're on a run, then you feel that. And I think the energy can impact things. I really do. That's something I wanted to make sure I said while I was on here is, in my experience, new energy is really fascinating. If I win a deal and I got that new energy with somebody, that's the best kind of energy, and I can go grow off of that. But if you get to know somebody over time, you're doing a great job. It's just a different energy.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I completely agree. Man, this has been a long time
I
coming.
know.
Thank
I
you so
know.
much for
Yeah.
taking the
This is
time
awesome.
to be here, and like I'm sure we're gonna do like way more.
Awesome.
The one thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap it up is like I know that, like you've been, like you said before, you were a co-founder of one of the companies in the healthcare space.
Mhm.
Now you are the founder and you're starting to see like more in, like you're basically in the weeds of like running the operations, being the CEO of the company.
Mhm.
I know you just mentioned that was going to be one of my questions is like you've been seeking out like either coaches or masterminds or like
Mhm.
continue investing in yourself to become the best possible CEO that you can be for your company
Sure.
and to grow as a person. It's as do you think that that's one of the best things to do as a leader of a company or as a CEO, or could you correlate directly like the success that Humans of Healthcare has had with the fact that you have put in so much time and effort into like, bettering yourself as a CEO, as a
Oh yeah,
person?
undoubtedly. I've been coached my whole life from, the time I started playing Little League baseball, and it's done me wonders, right? It helped me in ways I couldn't have done on my own. There's no way. But in this case for business, like I just thought logically, well, I've never been a CEO before. And so where's the course for that? And so I did. I researched it, and I kind of fell into something that was right for me. And there's a lot of options out there, right? And I did read a lot,
There's a
but
lot of options.
there's something that grabs you,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to kind of be looking for it, right? So I was looking for it, made sense, found it, and I wouldn't change anything about it. I love like almost um, s- giving myself over to it, right? And not questioning it. There's something in that. It's like I'm a Christian, so I believe, and it's one of those faith things where find something that makes sense to you, give yourself over to it, see what happens. And that's my advice. Just find it and go with it, trust your gut, and then follow what they're telling you. Don't pick and choose. Throw yourself in, see what happens. It's been a good experience in my world.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So we've gone over, the challenges. We've gone
Yeah.
over some of the rewards. Tell us what's your main driver. Like, what is it that keeps pushing you to do this? Is it like the financial freedom aspect of it? Is it like the impact that you want to have on the space and on the world, like in
Yeah.
general? Is
Yeah.
it your family? What is the main thing that pushes you to keep doing it?
This is kind of where I get selfish. It's for me,
Mm-hmm.
and it is ambition that I get to satisfy. I've always had it, and I now get to go figure out how to satisfy my ambition. I hope that it's not endless, but it might be. Um, but the people that I go through the journey with have become clearly the most important thing, right? I don't focus on the results. I don't focus on any of that stuff right now. I don't control the outcomes, right? I've just, again, I've just sort of let that happen. I don't think about it anymore. Outcomes will be outcomes. I can't control that stuff. So here I am on this journey, and the people that I go through the journey with, they have amazed me. Like, I've been amazed by people, and I'm doing it for people too. Like the technicians on my app, the Downtime Trace app, I was asked a question by a major VC in Nashville, which is the epicenter for healthcare. This is a few weeks ago. And I didn't know how to answer it, but I was asked. And what I blurted out was, this is for the technicians that don't have options, that don't have a voice, that are making $50 an hour, who could be making 5 times that amount if it weren't for just a few administrative, things that they don't like, but technology can now solve for that. And I'm really happy for them because, there's a small pool, they're burnt out, they're retiring, but this might prolong that and can really help healthcare, but it really helps those people. So, yeah.
No, well, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you for
man.
that. Thank you for the explanation.
Yeah.
Thanks for, everything that you've been saying here. Like this, it's very much something that can help someone else that was in similar situation that you were back then.
Yeah.
Even inspired to, take the leap and, going through the entrepreneurship route.
Yeah.
Where can they find you? And people want to connect with you
Sure.
if they want to, look up more of your content for humans of healthcare.
Yeah.
Or want to find out a little bit more about you. Where can they follow you?
Yeah, I'd say just look up Humans of Healthcare USA or Humans of Healthcare. It's on, we're on YouTube and LinkedIn. I mean, it'd be hard not to find us, I think. And TikTok, is a great place to go. But yeah, Humans of Healthcare. Got a Linktree page too. I don't know the address off the top of my head, but
I'll put the links below.
yeah, we don't have a website yet. We'll get there. We've just started doing business, at Humans of Healthcare with small business owners, trying to help them promote their content, help them with content in some cases. But we've got a great first customer who's a business owner in Dallas, and we've helped him grow his viewership and his engagement and all that stuff by thousands of percentages points versus what it was just last week, frankly. And I'm really excited about the Humans of Healthcare aspect, doing that for small business owners. And then Downtime Trace, if you go to Humans of Healthcare, you'll find me and I'll be able to, but Downtime Trace is the other way. Like that is downtimetrace.com, straightforward. If you're a medical equipment service tech, look for downtimetrace.com.
Hey, if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or an industry expert who has an interesting story or insight worth sharing, we want to feature you on our podcast. So click the link below to apply, tell us a little bit about yourself, and get ready to start inspiring our listeners.